Hello again, this is Mr. James. I am back with another reading lesson for today. We're going to continue reading from our Explorers books. But before we get to reading, let's go through our few slides here to introduce what we're going to be reading today. As you are aware from yesterday, the enduring understanding is that learners understand that explorers have had both positive and negative effects on societies. The book we're reading right now outlines this really well with the triumph or trouble boxes that are in there. That sort of tells you whether the explorer and the exploration that they did, it gives you an opinion that it could be considered a success, and it also could be considered a bit of a failure, causing both negative and positive effects. Our essential question is, how do readers quote accurately from a text when comparing and contrasting themes and topics? So remember to be either accurately quoting if you're using quotations in your answers, or be paraphrasing, meaning using your own words if you're not going to put that in quotation marks. Today's objective is I can determine main idea and key details, and we're going to be reading pages 8 through 11. Make sure you have your book with you and probably your packet as well. And be sure to follow along in your own text as I read. Let me go ahead and switch over to my text here. All right. So this would be page 8 here. As you can see at the top of the page, there we go, it scrolled for me. This is in the Asia section, which means that this particular explorer explored in Asia. And I'm going to go ahead and get started. Expedition to Tibet. In 1903, a British expedition to Tibet set out from India, which at the time was ruled by Britain. Little was known about Tibet, as foreigners had been banned since the 1850s. Francis Younghusband led the expedition. Younghusband was not only an explorer, he was also an officer in the British Army, and he took 3,000 soldiers with him. Reasons for the expedition. Officially, Younghusband was going to Tibet to discuss a trade agreement between British India and Tibet, and to explore the country. However, there was another reason for his journey. British authorities in India thought Russia wanted to control Tibet. The British thought Russia was sending weapons to Tibet that could be used to stage an attack on British India. Explorers become invaders. The Tibetans did not want the British Army in their country. They saw the British expedition as an invasion, which was what it soon became. To stop the British, Tibetan forces tried to block the road to the capital. Oh, I have to remember, I looked this up earlier. Oh my gosh, now I've forgotten. Lhasa. But the Tibetans were armed with old-fashioned weapons. Instead of turning back, as peaceful explorers would have done, the British Army opened fire with guns. The conflict was not balanced. Hundreds of Tibetans were killed, but very few British soldiers died. Sorry, I kind of struggled my way through that page. Going to the next page. Once we get it loaded, learn a little bit more about this exploration of Tibet, if it ever loads. All right, there we go. Sorry about that. Next part says, scorched earth. The Tibetans began to realize that they could not fight off the British and their powerful weapons. Instead, they began a scorched earth campaign where they destroyed anything the British might find useful. Villages were deserted, supplies were carried away and hidden, and crops were burned. The Tibetans thought that with nothing to eat, the British would go away. But this was not successful. The British had brought supplies with them, and they were able to fish and Tibet's lakes and hunt wild animals. A trade agreement. The British finally reached the Tibetan capital of Lhasa on August 3rd, 1904, by which time all the Tibetan leaders had fled in fear. Young husband forced junior Tibetan officials to sign an agreement that said the British could trade in Tibet. It also said Tibet had to pay for reparations to make up for attacking the expedition. Until they were paid, the British would occupy part of Tibet's territory. That word reparations in there looks like the word repair to me, which means they're going to have to pay for what needs fixed after they attack that expedition. So the question in the end ends up being, is this a triumph or a trouble? Triumph says leading the expedition across icy plains and through high mountain passes showed great leadership skills. And young husband was a patriot trying to keep British India safe. He showed the Tibetans that siding with Russia was a bad idea. Or was it trouble? The Russian plan to control Tibet never existed, so the expedition was pointless. Even at the time, young husband was criticized for using powerful weapons against untrained, poorly armed Tibetans. Buildings were torn down, crops ruined, and part of the country was occupied. So I guess you get to make up your mind whether that was triumph or trouble. There's arguments for both. Please make sure when you are done listening to this that you answer your questions in complete sentences using text evidence in your packet. Looking forward to talking to you again soon. Hopefully you are healthy and all is well at your home. Till next time.